Welcome back, 365 Sports. Paul Catalina, Craig Smoke. Smokey's out again today. Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com, recruiting analyst with us now. And Grayson, so far we're a little ways into spring football. The first scrimmage is tomorrow. What are you hearing? What is the kind of buzz around the camp right now, and what are the things that maybe might concern you injury-wise or things that have popped up?
Right. So, I mean, they technically had a scrimmage this past weekend. So that was kind of their first one, but I think this one will be a little bit more in depth. I think it's going to be a little bit longer, a little bit bigger, a little bit more of an event, for them to really go out there and kind of see how everyone's looking, see how the parts fit, and just kind of see, if they've made improvements over the past week. So, yeah, that's kind of a big thing that, I think they're trying to figure out. Obviously, you look at the offensive line and defensive lines, those are two areas of concern. I think for people who watch Baylor, people who cover Baylor, I also think it's a concern for the staff as well. I mean, those were positions that they looked at addressing in the transfer portal. They did it to a certain extent, but it seems like they're probably going to have to add to those positions, or you would think that they would add to those positions at some point, post-spring. So that's something that's definitely a big thing. Ohio transfer offensive lineman Kurt Daneker has been out for a while now. We haven't seen him since the first practice availability. So he's been out for some time now. So I think Dave Aranda's probably going to give more of an update on that, but it's obviously a concern when a guy who you brought in to be a starting guard for your team and really be a true leader and anchor for the offensive line missing extensive time. That's not great. It's better now than in the fall, but still not awesome to be missing him up to this point. So that's kind of the biggest thing for me. I think in general, though, these scrimmages are definitely about kind of finding the guys on your team who are really going to turn into guys who you feel like can not just start for you, but play major snaps for you. And I think that's what Baylor's trying to figure out throughout spring ball as guys develop, get better, as young guys continue to try to turn the corner, and as older guys, really try to re-solidify and redefine themselves after what I would say was a pretty tough year last season.
Grayson, we heard from Kevin Curtis and talking the cornerbacks room the other day. They come back pretty much in full. I know there's a couple of injuries right now that are keeping guys like Chateau Reed out, as well as Isaiah Dunsford. But other than that, I mean, they are pretty much full across the board. What are your thoughts on Caden Jenkins and company? Obviously, he's the headliner. They've got some expectations over on that side. Do you think they can meet him, and do you think that's going to be a strength like many people expect it to be?
I mean, that definitely should be a strength, and I think if you look at the early depth chart, that definitely should be a strength. I mean, Caden Jenkins getting a guy like that back, an all Big 12 caliber cornerback, returning, that's huge. But then you also have veterans, Tevin Williams and Chateau Reed. They've played a lot of snaps, and those are guys that you can definitely rely on. I think we need to see steps for both of them in the right direction, more steps. But I think in general, their experience, their knowledge, their athleticism, their savviness, I think all of that could come together for this team, and at least it gives them, veteran depth at the position. And then you look a little further, two young guys that I really like, and Reggie Bush and LeVar Thornton are kind of right there as well. And so, you got 5, 6 guys that you feel really good about. We'll see if Isaiah Dunston, what he looks like when he returns after suffering that season-ending injury just 3 games into the year. But I think in general, this is probably the deepest position and probably the position that I would think Baylor feels the best at this point. There's a couple other positions you can make some arguments about, but specifically on the defensive side, there's no question that cornerback is the headliner.
Grayson, visitors, anybody intriguing popping into some of these practices?
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a few guys that are, taking trips to practices kind of throughout, this spring. I would say, earlier this week, Palestine running back John Denman took a visit to Baylor. He got offered a little bit later in March, and he's a guy who is very intriguing. You know, he ran a 10,600 meter. He's about 5'11", 206 pounds. So, I mean, you put that all together, you got a really explosive playmaker. He had really good film this year as well, even though he had limited amounts of carries. But I think it kind of been a foregone conclusion that, you know, Baylor had Caden Knighton, the 4-star running back out of Oklahoma, and then they were going to take one more. And they already have 2 4-star guys visiting for official visits in Ricky Stewart and Michael Turner. So it was kind of like, okay, they're probably going to get one of those guys. But I think John Denman put his name in that group. And so now Baylor gives themselves another option moving forward. Another guy who visited with Cameron Morgan, the edge prospect out of South Oak Cliff. And he's a guy who's a top 100 prospect, would be one of the best prospects Baylor would have ever landed in its school's history. I mean, a really, really good player, a guy who has been to Baylor quite a few times, definitely has interest. And he actually set up his official visit as well. So you put that all together, and for Baylor to have a shot at getting a really high 4-star type prospect at edge, which is a position they definitely need to address, I mean, that would be huge. There are more and more guys, and tons of guys are visiting. You know, you got the commits to a visit as well. So yeah, I think overall Baylor's doing a really nice job as we get closer and closer to the spring football game, which will be a nice visitor list. And then, of course, the official visits coming up at the end of April and then in June.
I don't mean to correct on there, but my East Texas has to. It's Palestine, Grayson, just for future reference, where Adrian Peterson's from. Palestine's who's currently in the Middle East, but just for future reference, Palestine, that's how we do things in East Texas. And that's the home of good old AD. But
and Bill Bradley.
And Bill Bradley also from Palestine, Texas. But Dave Aranda speaking tomorrow. If you could ask him a question, I don't know if you'll be out there or not, but if you could ask him a question, what would you, I guess, have top of mind to ask Dave Aranda?
I mean, the first question is definitely going to be about Kurt Banneker. I mean, you got to figure out kind of what's going on there. You know, is he going to be healthy? But aside from that obviously the injury question is always a good one to ask. I think it's definitely about him. Now that we're kind of into spring ball a little bit, just asking him kind of what that transition has been like to really focusing on the defense. I know we've had time to ask him these questions, but I think as time progresses, I would think the answer changes some, and just kind of, how getting back to, more of his roots, how has that, appealed to him? How's that worked out for him? How's he felt about it, even though he's a head coach, just kind of taking that step to being the defense coordinator, the linebacker coach, while also being the head coach. Just kind of how that, just how he's adapted to all of that, I think is really intriguing.
Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com recruiting analyst. Grayson, will you be at the scrimmage tomorrow, or are you going to wait till the spring game?
I will not be there tomorrow. I will be there this week, though, of course, on Tuesday. So
okay. Not
there tomorrow, but on Tuesday, yes.
All right. Well, Grayson, we'll talk to you again next week. We'll see you on Tuesday when you're here doing the Bearcast with Craig. That is Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Please subscribe and go to the site. So, yeah,